you saw the very best players the entire country has to offer, and you saw it throughout the course of the weekend.
He's growing, he's improving at such a rapid rate. He's going to be a very good player.
This guy's a cross between Sean Marion and Lamar Odom. He's a 6'8" lefty, a high-level athlete, but also got a little bit of point-forward skills in him as he can handle and pass the ball extremely well. At this point, they are simply the standard by which everyone else is judged in prep school basketball. He's considering the likes of Michigan, North Carolina, Kentucky, Kansas. Welcome back to this virtual episode of the Upside Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Finkelstein, and we are very fortunate to have Mizzou head coach Cuonzo Martin here with us today. Coach, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Well, as we've said last weekend, this is one of several episodes we hope to do as we continue to explore the racial issues that are plaguing our country now and investigate the macro by diving into the micro and in the basketball world that we all kind of, the prism that we share. Coach, I wanted to start by what brought me to you specifically, because I reached out to friends of mine, college coaches in the Black coaches community, and I said, hey, who's the leader now? You know, in this generation with no clear John Thompson, John Chaney, Nolan Richardson, you know, where do you guys turn? And the two names I kept hearing over and over were yours and Jeff Capel's. And so I said, well, I've got to reach out. So big thanks to now Bridgeton Academy head coach Whit LeJour for putting me in touch with you. I know he was your prep coach, but I did want to first and foremost thank you for doing this, but also shed light on why we asked you, because it's your peers and people in the industry who look up to you as a leader.
Well, certainly honored, but I don't necessarily see it that way. I just see it as a guy that's obligated to do my job, and that's to be the best guy I can be from a character standpoint, a guy that has to try my best to align my principles up with my character. And that's easier said than done. That's an everyday battle. And that's how I try to live. I try to be as honest as possible. A lot of young guys call me all the time. I've given whatever I have. I don't have anything to hide because my job is to keep this thing moving forward the best way I can. There are a lot of things that I see that I struggle with, but I just simply try to be the best guy I can become, man. And that's an everyday process. And I appreciate that, but I'm just like everybody else.
Well, I think that's probably what any great leader would say. The first place I wanted to start was your decision to come back to the state of Missouri and take over the Mizzou job. You were born and at any point in this interview, if I get something wrong, stop me and let me know. But you were born in St. Louis. You later moved to East St. Louis, which is actually in Illinois. I learned that in doing my research. But this was, you were at Cal Berkeley, and Missouri was, this was after Michael Brown, of course, was fatally shot in 2014. And a lot of the racial tensions were very, very high when you decided to come back to take this Mizzou job. And you were leaving a place that, in my research, I saw even your wife noted was a liberal, progressive place in Cal Berkeley. So what was behind that decision to come back and take on this job in particular?
I think the biggest thing is, of course, grateful to be at Mizzou. I think it's a wonderful place, but also was certainly honored to be a part of Cal Berkeley. And I learned a lot. Just lifestyle, culture, diversity, people, protests, all those things. I learned a great deal from a lot of different people, all walks of life. And just coming back to Mizzou, I just felt like it was important that you have to be a part of of course, you want to win at the highest level as a coach, but you have to be a part of the community. And I think as the older you get, you start to understand those things. And I think as a young coach in this thing, you're going at 90 miles an hour. And all you're trying to do is, win games, in some ways provide for your family, which you're doing that, but and trying to do the right things, help develop young men, all those things that it takes to make a good coach, father, and leader. So I was just trying to do that. But then you thrust into some situations and you have to be a part of it because you're a part of the community. And as college coach, you're not only part of that town, you're part of that state. And I think it's very important to be a part of that. And again, there will be some uncomfortable conversations. I've been a part of some of those, but in order for us to live a life of comfort and get a peace of mind, we have to go through that. And that's not an easy thing to do. And I just feel like I need to do that. Again, I want to win at the highest level and all those things, but I can't go to bed at night. Me, knowing I grew up in East St. Louis, Illinois, and I still see myself in a lot of ways as that kid that grew up in East St. Louis, and all of a sudden, though I'm in a privileged position right now, and I'm grateful to be here, but I still see those little boys and little girls in East St. Louis, and I say East St. Louis, but also low-income areas as well, that need support, that need somebody to say, man, you're special, you're a beautiful person, you're okay, you are smart. No, don't let anybody tell you differently. So I still feel like I have to be that.
Mm. Is there something specific, if you'll allow me this, and this is from a Sports Illustrated article. This was a quote from your wife. She said, "It scared me to go back to the middle of the country, but we were like, somebody has to go back and be an example. Somebody has to go back and be a mentor. Somebody has to be the one that others can look up to. So this became the next step of our journey." And I hope that's an accurate quote, but it seems consistent with things that I have heard you say, oftentimes intertwined with your strong faith about how this is, the next journey or the next task that has been assigned to you.
Well, she just it was up to her. Now, very intelligent woman, probably the smartest person I think I know. Beautiful person, has a great spirit, strong, tough, all those things. In a lot of ways, I agree with her. I enjoyed being in California, but I just felt like that is not for us. We have a lot of work to get done. That's not. I'm a guy that I got to be in the trenches. What I prayed to God, and I'm just kind of giving you content, and hopefully I continue to answer that question. About 9 years ago, maybe a little longer, I just prayed to God. I just said, I'm tired of running, because oftentimes in inner city environments, you would pray. Help us get our rent paid for, help us to get food on the table, help us to get Christmas gifts, clothes, because we had very humble beginnings, but my mom did a tremendous job in providing food and things we needed. So you'd always pray that growing up. So I got to a point, I'd say about 9, maybe 10 years ago, and I just said, God, I'm tired of running. And I pray that you give me that tough assignment, whatever that toughest assignment is, give me that assignment.
That's it, yeah.
But when it gets too tough, give me the strength to get back up. Give me the strength to get back up. Now, if it's your will for me not to get back up, because at that time I had a wife and I had 3 kids. My daughter might have been maybe 3 years old, 2. So I said, God, if I don't get back up, then you have to provide for my family. And meaning, if I don't get back up, that means I'm no longer on this earth. So you have to provide for my family because you gave them to me. But I just said, give me that tough assignment. I'm tired of running. I just go ahead and give it, whatever that assignment is, give it to me, and I'm ready to battle. This
perspective, I know you had a personal battle with cancer that I've read about, and did this perspective stem from that personal battle? I know your son was very young, and I've read and seen you said, let me get until he's 18 years old. But did you have this perspective, this willingness to kind of go into the flames, if you will, before that, or is this a byproduct of that?
Well, what it was, going back, and again, Adam, forgive me if I never truly answered the question. You can ask it again, because I always try to give context of a backdrop. But just going back to my mom, she worked as a maid in St. Louis, downtown St. Louis. We grew up. She worked at a sports bar at night. Yep. So that means, my brother and I, we were teenagers. We'd be out 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and just so I've seen a lot, experienced a lot, and I got to a point when I left college. You want to do more and be more. I never thought I could be an NBA player because my knees were bad, so I never felt that. But and then when my son was born in '97, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in '97 of November, but he was born in August of '97, and it hit me when the doctor did tests and X-rays, and he said, when they thought. They told me it was bronchitis when I was playing in Avellino, Italy. So we
Wow.
flew back the next day from Italy to Rome, New York to Indianapolis, where I lived. So I was taught, again, the time changes over the years as I tell this story. So it was between 1:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. My wife and I went to the emergency room because we
Because
flew back.
you collapsed, is that
Yes.
right? That's what I
Well,
read.
what
Yeah.
happened when I was in Italy, I ran down the court. We were on the baseline, and I ran the half court, and I was breathing like this. That's how I was breathing, and I just dropped. And they took me back in the training room. And the trainer, he couldn't speak any English, but what he was trying to say, he was saying, when you first came to Italy, you were so big, but he said, now you're small. So they did tests and x-rays in Italy, and they said, we think it's bronchitis. Now, again, I think they might have said that just because they didn't want to alarm me, because I had to get back to the States.
Right.
But I could tell by the looks on the players' faces, because we had about 4 guys that played in the States, and they could speak fluent English. And we had Terry Dozier, who's my teammate. He played in South Carolina. Of course, he could speak English. And Terry was a praying man. And the way he was praying, it could have been more than bronchitis. Yeah. So we flew back to eventually got to Indianapolis. And like I said, it's between 1:30 and 3 o'clock in the morning. And the doctor said, after all the tests and x-rays, he said, I don't know if you're going to die, but this is life-threatening. And I glanced at my wife just a bit because I didn't want to stare at her completely because I had broke down. Not that I'm ashamed of breaking down, but I just wanted to try to be strong in that situation. But I glanced at her and looked straight ahead. And obviously Josh was 4 months old at the time. And so that night, just to make sure, they were hopeful that it was tuberculosis. But what they found a mass about the size of a baseball between my chest and lung area. So they were hopeful that it was tuberculosis. And in that moment, I was in the room. My wife and my son, they couldn't be in there because they had to keep me secluded just in case it was tuberculosis. And I was just sitting in that room, and it really, at that point, just like, man, I might not be on this earth any longer. And it just, because again, I had no control. It's not as a situation you're out playing basketball, you can beat the opponent. I have no control over this situation. So it's obviously God and the doctors, the medicines in which they operate. I mean, and eventually when they started giving me the medicines, I don't know, doc giving me the names. I don't really care about the names of this medicine. Doc. I never said this part, but if I'm no longer in this earth, what does the name of a medicine matter? And I don't plan on being in this position again. But I just prayed to God. I said, God, if it's your will, just allow me to see my son, whose name is Joshua, turn 18. Yeah. Just allow that. And then whatever happens. And Josh is 22 years old right now. He graduated from Purdue University, studied linguistics, and had a minor in Spanish. Now he's going to Boston University to study speech pathology. So, we're ahead of the game now. So I'm a happy dad. He's a good guy. He's a genuine guy. He's a sound young man. He has a tremendous spirit. And that was it for me. But it was a very, very tough time because I had no control over the situation.
So if you don't go through that, how did that change your long-term perspective? If you don't go through that, are you still the same guy who says, you know what, we're going to leave Cal Berkeley to seek out this challenge? Or is there a correlation there, or were you always that guy?
I think I was always that guy, but because I saw my mom, I saw the struggles in which my mom operated. She didn't make excuses. She didn't complain. Of course, she struggled, and I would imagine she did a lot of crying and leaning on shoulders with her sisters and her close friends. But she never let us see that side. Not to say she was such a strong woman, like I don't want my kids to see this, but I knew she struggled. And so it was my whole mission before, my wife and my kids was, whatever it takes, find a way to make my mom happy. And I didn't have a plan because, East St. Louis is a beautiful city. I love my city, but it's not a lot of business and corporations that you can go home to. So it was really about whatever I can do to make my mom happy and find her a better situation. That was a whole mission, but it wasn't a 10-year plan. That wasn't the case. When I went to college, I was going to college because that was talked about. My mom, continue to better yourself. I was able to play basketball and grateful for the scholarship that I earned. And Coach Keady let me be part of the program. So it was just my whole mission. Again, there was no 5-10-year plan. I got to find a way to make my mom happy. And it's crazy because we can laugh about it now, but when I was diagnosed with cancer, everybody kind of found out through the grapevine because the nurse at the hospital, she went home and said to her father the name of the person, and she didn't know who I was. I'm this or that, and not this. I'm anything special, but. And he said, "Who?" And it kind of went from there. Then all of a sudden, it just kind of went throughout the state and went from there. But I didn't call Coach Keady, none of those guys. They eventually called me. And the last person of importance that I called was my mom. I really struggled with calling because I didn't. It was almost as if I was letting her down.
Yeah.
So that was a tough call to make.
Because you were the strong one.
Well, no, she's stronger than me. She's way stronger than me. She's tougher than me and all that. And she's a beautiful woman. But I didn't want to let her down because I felt like that would be letting her down, So but my wife, kept saying, you have to call her now. I don't think my wife called her because she said, you have to call her. Because if my wife would have called her, my mom would have said, no, I'm calling him. So she left it up to me to make the call. And that was a tough call.
Yeah, I can imagine. Growing up in East St. Louis, and again, stop me, correct me if I'm wrong. I read stories about you having sunglasses taken off your head by gang members. You saying, "I want those back," and then all of a sudden you having a run when guns are shot at you, but you've seen from cancer to knee injuries to those upbringings. That upbringing, you've been through a lot of tough times. Does that upbringing? So I want to kind of keep diving in the same thing to see if those times in that history has empowered you to come back and play this leadership role when times are so tough right now. So does that upbringing? How did that impact it? Does it impact your philosophy now, your willingness to come back and take on a leadership role? Because I mean, let's face it, that university, it wasn't just in the area. That university had issues. The president, the chancellor resigned. The football team protested. The numbers dropped and disproportionate with students of color. So I mean, you were more than a basketball coach when they hired you. Those are my words, not yours. But so does that upbringing? Was that connected to it?
Well, I think the upbringing makes you tough enough. It makes you tough enough to go through hard times. But I always say, there have been many Black leaders in the community. There have been many that don't get credit for stuff that goes on behind the scenes. And I've always said, man, if you have to take a stand for, if all you're doing is just coaching a program, you make an X amount of dollars, if you're able to win a championship, you do this, then what did you really do? What did you really do? Did you impact lives? So, and I always said on the tough days when you get into situations like this, man, Martin Luther King went through it. What I'm going through can't be any tougher than that. As Barack Obama is a president, what he went through, what I'm doing can't be any tougher than that. So we don't have time to complain. We don't have time to make excuses. So you have to keep pushing forward. But I think East St. Louis is just who I am, because again, and I've said it before, I'm grateful to be sitting here, but I don't know how I can eat a nice meal and drink a glass of wine if that's what you do. And all of a sudden there's still kids in East St. Louis that are struggling. We have to fight to continue to improve our school systems, continue to improve those sporting programs in those areas. So now, not only does football, men's basketball, because most inner city areas, you have football, men's basketball, women's basketball, maybe volleyball, baseball here and there, track. But what about soccer, swimming, tennis? Let's create all the sports. So now we don't have, in those areas, we don't have just 25 athletes going to school to get a scholarship. We can have 75 to 100. And now all of a sudden, 10 years later, you change the community, because you have 100 plus every year going off to somebody's college, and it doesn't matter what level. And I think those are the things that we have to fight for.
Let's fast forward to modern day. And what I want to make sure that I'm not doing is acting like this is a beginning of a new issue, because clearly it's a continuation of systemic issues. But from a coach's standpoint, what's your dialogue like with your players right now? And I know it's probably over Zoom like this, but how are you talking to your players about what's going on in the country right now?
We talk. We have 2 Zoom calls a week, and we had a powerful, in my opinion, a powerful Zoom call, because we've had guest speakers and that sort of thing. We had a powerful. We had the chief of police here in Columbia on a Zoom call, and one of the things we said, and I talked to him ahead of time. I said, "Chief, we need you right now," and he was tremendous. He got on the call with the players, and it's our whole staff. We do it as everybody, because we don't have nothing to hide. And he said, "Guys, I understand. I feel your pain. I know what you're going through. You can get it off your chest at me, however you want to do it. But let's get it off our chest and let's figure out a way to solve this problem." And I thought he was very powerful. I thought he was candid. I thought he was real, and he was so impressive. We had two players after the talks text me and say, "Coach, when I'm done playing ball, I want to think about being a police officer." Now that was great to me, because I've talked to our players about being a police officer in the future.
Wow.
I think athletes, because with a lot of the issues I think that stem from police officers, and I don't need to sit in, I'll say it just to say it now, but I'm not going to say it 50 times. Of course, we know they're a good police officer. We understand that part.
Of course.
What I said to our guys, you can be a police officer, you can create change, especially those athletes that are in transition and done playing, opportunities that don't present themselves. You can be a police officer because you can police the community that you live in. You can police the community that you went to school at. So there's a little level of comfort as you transition into it. Now, because you're also educated from the standpoint, you've been through college, you've been in locker rooms, so you understand camaraderie, you understand lifestyle, different cultures, different backgrounds, you understand people. And I think athletes have a tremendous platform to be police officers or to be in that service, because oftentimes they don't see color, they see people.
Right.
I think when your criteria is not as strong as a police officer, and then you police in communities that you don't live in, that's when problems present themselves. I think they really do.
That's interesting. As I said, you were someone who has been mentioned to me as a leader in the coaching industry. So I'm curious what guidance you would offer other coaches, perhaps even white coaches, if they called you and said, "Hey, I'll cite the Minnesota Timberwolves head coach, Ryan Saunders, who basically said, I can't totally relate to what," and I'm paraphrasing, "I can't totally relate to what they're going through. But if Matt Painter, I know you guys have a relationship because of the Purdue ties, but if someone else, a colleague of yours who comes from, a Caucasian coach calls you, what would your advice, or if anyone listening, because we've got a lot of coaches who listen to this, what would your advice be to them?
I think that one of the things that I would say, because again, I think we're all in this fight together, but as a coach, here's some things you have to understand, and I'll kind of give you a backdrop. We do a Zoom call every week with my family, meaning my mom, my sisters, my brother, my aunts, my uncles, nephews, nieces, cousins. So you talk about a lot of people on a Zoom call. We do it every Sunday.
That's pretty cool.
And yes, and it's a great time. We have a good time, but my sister kind of runs the platform. She's a very intelligent woman. She kind of runs it. Again, we have a great time. And she said, I have questions for the men and the boys on this call first. So it's my brother, my uncle, my nephews, all the way down, my sons. And she said, how do you feel about what's going on in society? How do you feel as a man, as a black man? How do you feel about it? And everybody answered and said what they had to say. So it came down to now my mom, and my mom said, sorry can't bring back a mother's son. The word sorry can't bring a mother's son back,
right,
because he is gone. I will never see him again. I think that's very important. The other thing is, like my mom, she got to talking and she said, most mothers pray for a protective fence around their sons. And she said, I've been praying for that fence for 50 years because my brother's 50 years old. And I continue to pray that for my 50-year-old son all the way down to my grandkids. So those are prayers every night. And not that she doesn't pray for her granddaughters, but our sisters, that's constant prayer. And then she said, my sister said this part, most black boys have to take a final exam just before they leave the house. Stay out of this way. Watch for this. What you got on? What you saying? Be prepared if this happens. And it's constant. And I think for us, and my son said this, and I thought it was powerful. He did. I was impressed with him. You know, I'm sitting back. I got a little emotional. He said we have to stop valuing tranquility over progress. We have to stop valuing tranquility over progress. And I think that's very important. Just so to say what I would say to another coach, we all should be feeling a certain way. Just because my skin happened to be black and I'm from East St. Louis, I shouldn't feel any more or less than you do, Adam, because you
exactly.
I mean, when you see the numbers of black men and women that are being murdered, especially by the people that are supposed to protect me, that is a hard thing. And now here's the other hard pill to swallow. Probably a 95 or more percentage in these cases, there's not hand-in-hand combat going back and forth. One person with a gun, the other person is dying. One person with a gun, the other person is dying. Now, it's one thing if we're in a shootout, but there's no shootout. Right. So, and I've said this many times, I think the most powerful people, in my opinion, and it's only my 2 cents, the most powerful people in our country, the most power, and the ones that have the most impact, and this is the part we have to understand. First, school teachers. I can remember certain things about each one of my school teachers, how they impacted my life, how they lifted me up, how they encouraged me. They didn't break my spirits, how they did so many good things, my school teachers. Because when that kid leaves home, that is the most important person from like 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. that they will encounter. My teachers almost became my mom in a lot of ways. Whether it's male or female, they became family members. So the teachers are very important. Then the second piece, the police officers, very important to our society, to young men and women growing up, to all ages, all walk of life. They have to be keen and sound in making decisions. The precision has to be at a high level, and that's a tough job. So I'm not questioning whether they're doing good or bad. That is a tough job, and they have to understand that people lean on them for protection, for peace of mind. In a lot of ways, they believe in you as that's a person I can lean on as my counselor, my teacher, whatever it is, that police officer. That is a powerful position. And then the last piece, I think, in our communities are the churches, the fellowship, the churches, all the ministries, the pastors, the priests, the bishops, all of them. I think they play a powerful role, because what happens is we lean on you. We come to you on Sundays because I see you as the closest thing to God. So I lean on everything you say, and I tithe what I don't have, 10%. And sometimes I give more, because if that's what it says, I'm willing to do that. So now when coronavirus hit, Corona should have been a blip on the radar, because the community still provides. The church still provides the community. We still have food. The church, because we've tithed so much to the churches, you still provide. We can't have crisis situations in a community where you have several churches in those communities. There's something broken. One church can have more than the other, and this family over here 2 blocks away from their church is not eating because they don't attend that church. That's not a church. That's a building. That's not a ministry of God and Christ or whatever you worship. That's a building. That's what people go into, because you have to service the people.
That's and I would say, I mean, you've got to put a coach right up there with the teacher. I mean, in terms of,
I apologize. Yeah. I consider a coach as a teacher. So
I'm sure. Yeah.
The transition to college. What happens in our profession, as you probably heard, I don't want to say that there's a lot of stuff that go under the table. And oftentimes these young men, they get themselves in situations on the surface that seem like a good one, because maybe some took place on the backside. But there have been a lot of guys since I've been coaching that have gone to other universities that call me for help. Not necessarily give money, but help in the next step, the next move in their lives, because of their previous situation. Not to say my situation is the best, because oftentimes you're going to hear from me accountability, discipline, respect, having gratitude, being grateful for the opportunity, have compassion for people that you feel less than, having a level of toughness to fight through tough times in life. And sometimes you can go to a place where I don't really have to deal with that. I can just play ball. I can go to class. Right. So we have to do a better job as coaches of teaching life lessons and tough lessons. And I think oftentimes when you see so many young men that are transferring, is because there's been situations of comfort. There's been a lot of pats on the back. So now all of a sudden I get to a situation where I heard no, and he really meant no. I'm ready to transfer. He doesn't like me. No, I do like you. Actually, I love you. That's why I'm doing this to you, because discipline is another form of love. So I do love you. But in order for you to be successful in life, we have to go through this right here. And I think oftentimes they're not getting that, and they're falling by the wayside. And what's worse, some of these guys are leaving without degrees.
Yeah. Coach, you touched upon something briefly there, coronavirus, and it's affecting communities of color disproportionately to other communities. How does that, specific to our corner of the world, your corner of the world in college basketball, how does that impact the way you communicate with your team, think about your team? I've talked to coaches who said, we understand the risk, but we've got to get our guys back on campus as quick as we can, because so we don't need to practice, but we need to get them out of where they are. Right, their neighborhoods are more dangerous. We need them here to protect them. So I'm trying to want to see if you could give some perspective to that within that context.
No, I agree with that. I think that is important. That's the one thing we talked to our AD about here. Jim is a tremendous man. Just really, some of our guys, they live in some really humble beginnings, tough environments. So to get them on campus, to have a peace of mind, so we can see them. And obviously these NCAA rules can limit you in your interaction with guys, but just really have them on campus, I think, is very important, because, man, not everybody are eating 3 meals a day with snacks when they go home. That's not the case. So maybe one here and there. Now I'm out all hours of the night. Not to say they're not doing it here in some cases, but just I think what it is, what we try to give them here on campus, we give them. I always say you have a life of structure, and I tell our guys, anytime you get to a point in your life, or when you get to the point when your life has boundaries and structure, it will minimize the chaos. So once your life gets to a level that you have boundaries and structure, the chaos is minimized, and then you have a peaceful life.
And that's what, by getting them back on campus, that's what able to provide.
We have some guys that have a great home life. So, but I think for the most part, it'd be great if they all here, because they get used to the environment. They get used to being around each other. They get used to way of life. Because we have some guys that are very intelligent in the classroom, struggled in the classroom early because they were away from us. Not really a lot of accountability in some areas, sleeping up on video games and all that. But I think that there's a certain level of structure when they're with us. Yes.
Coach, I've been trying to have, not just over the course of the last 10 days, but even before that, I would say for the better part of the last year, been having more conversations like this about race, to grow, to learn from friends of mine who don't come from the same, we don't have the same experiences, we don't have the same background. And I had a friend describe in one of those conversations this weekend, we got on the topic of amateurism, the NCAA issue. And this is a friend of mine, a friend of color, who said to me, it's another example of black bodies doing the work and white people profiting from it. And it stopped me in my tracks, because I have obviously the amateurism has been a hot topic for a while now, but it's, in the backdrop of what we're dealing with as a society now, it brought a unique perspective for me. So I wanted to ask you, if you will, about whether it's amateurism or the amount of black coaches, again, disproportionate to the amount of black athletes in basketball specifically, but across all sports. Ask you about a couple of those subjects specific to basketball. So I guess I could start on amateurism. What are your thoughts on amateurism, and specifically, because that analogy was one that I hadn't considered before, but immediately I saw, I understood the point. I understood where they were coming from.
Well, I think first and foremost, I think if the NBA and the NCAA agreed upon to allow guys to leave high school, go into the draft, I think they have that right. They've earned that right, and that's the decision that a young man and his family should be able to make, not anybody else. So, of course, the NBA has to agree upon that. But I think if they're in college, I think you have cost of attendance. And hear me when I say I like to see guys get as much money as possible. But I think with cost of attendance, I think guys get a nice amount of money. But here's where I like to see more money. For every student athlete that graduates, he should be allowed to get a job within a 30-mile radius of that campus, or even a 50-mile radius of that campus, to get a job. And the university gives him a $100,000 check, him or her $100,000 check, $100,000 check. You can say $50,000, depending on, how many sports. They graduate, here's a check. And we also have to help you get a job. Because when you're talking, and I'll say revenue sports, I'll say that right now. When you have Black athletes in the classroom, speaking more football, men's basketball, those guys performing at a high level. Oftentimes, if the classes are legitimate, graduating between a 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, maybe 2.6, they worked hard, they got a degree. Well, my resume doesn't look as good as that student over there with 3.9, so I don't get the job. I haven't had a chance to intern to get jobs and opportunities. So where do I go from here? So it's our jobs to help find them jobs, because talk about they generating billions of dollars for a university athletic department. Look at athletic departments right now because of athletics. So they're generating billions of dollars. So what at least we can do is get these guys opportunities to get jobs for them. So when they're done within a 30 or 50-mile radius of the camp, we got a job for you. Now, if the young man or young lady decide they don't want to take the job, okay, that's fine. We got you the job.
Right.
I think those are the things that we have to look at, because I would ask whoever's listening to this, I want them to think about this. And this is very important, because I try to do my research as much as possible, having guest speakers and all of that. I'm willing to bet, and I'm not a bet man for his money, but every major university, I'm just saying Power 5 right now, the other we can involve other ones too, but how many Black athletes have, and I'll say within a 30-mile radius of that campus, of each particular campus, how many Black athletes have successful jobs and careers within the 30-mile radius of that campus? I'm not talking about the ones that played professional sports and came back to live in that town and start their own business. I'm talking about the ones that got a degree, that weren't professionals, but they have a successful career within a 30-mile radius. I didn't say across the country. I'm giving you a 30-mile radius of that campus, because in those football stadiums, you have a lot of fans that support, and a lot of very successful fans. Those basketball arenas, you have fans and very successful fans. So I have to be good enough to get a job in your company. I have to be, I was good enough on the floor. So we have to find ways to get these guys jobs and opportunities. So now these guys, because they work so hard, train so hard, at least help me get a job. That's the least you can do as a university.
And not to mention that 30-mile-an-hour radius, those are businesses that have profited indirectly off of those athletic programs. I mean, that's a fact, is when people come to attend those games, it helps the local businesses. If we were to turn the attention to the coaching profession, again, the disproportionate amount of Black head coaches versus Black athletes. Another factor there would be the amount of, if a coach gets fired, the amount of Black head coaches that get a second job versus the amount of white head coaches who get a second job. So you get that second chance. It's a much higher percentage in both scenarios for the white head coach. I admittedly don't know the numbers on the percentages of administrators, but it certainly seems like it's a very Caucasian dominated field in terms of athletic directors. So as someone who is considered to be a leader in the Black coaches community, how do you respond to that?
Well, it's legit. I mean, and I could answer it in a lot of different ways, and I don't have numbers in front of me right now.
Right.
But I'll give you, two guys in my opinion, and there are more. When you're talking Mike Davis and John Thompson III, two Final Four coaches.
Gentlemen too.
Yes.
Absolute gentlemen.
Exactly.
Guys.
So with all due respect to Detroit, where Mike currently works, Mike is a high level coach and has a tremendous mind. John Thompson a tremendous mind, a high-level coach. And those are Final Four guys. I mean, their resumes are better than mine. Those guys are legit. Those guys should be coaching programs, in my opinion. So now you're talking about, I think when you look at coaches, when you look at each bench, and this is even for every young man that's being recruited, when you look at each bench, and I'm saying the Power 5 level, because I think everyone probably has, maybe nine guys, or 8 or 9 guys in position as in coaches and the coaching capacity. Lower levels probably don't have that resource. And I say that with all due respect. But if you don't have at least 3 black men on your staff, and majority of your roster is black, then what are you saying? You can perform for me, but you're not educated enough to be on my staff. I mean, that's what that says to me. So, but a lot of parents, I like the uniforms, or somebody on the backside is where you need to go. We need to get this so we can move this here. So all this stuff takes place. And you have a lot of educated parents that make decisions based on the wrong things. So, and then they're the same ones that complain about what's going on in society. Well, why are you complaining? You just sent your son without doing your homework. You just did that. I don't want to hear that. So do your homework. So now, again, if the staff doesn't have majority black guys on the staff, then that's fine. But if you have majority of black athletes on your roster and your staff doesn't say that, what are we doing? I'm going elsewhere.
And we should also point out that your staff, you have multiple white guys on your staff too.
Yeah.
So there's
they people, they're qualified people.
Yeah,
I mean, right. You want qualified people. So, but my thing is, if you don't have strong diversity on your staff, then what are you doing? I mean, because what message are you sending? And I think what happens with young players, especially when somebody push them to the certain schools, okay, this is where we need to go for this reason. Right. They don't think for themselves, but what the people that are pushing them in those directions fail to realize that young man will eventually become a man. All of a sudden he sees, wait. So I'm out here, now I'm older and I'm out here protesting. Well, I could have. And they start to ask questions. That's what I always say to my staff, let your words be your words, because eventually these young guys become men. Yeah. My words going to stay the same. That whether you like it or not, it's the same words. And I think that is very important, because you're dealing with young lives, and it's important that you sound in what you're saying. Right.
I want to ask you about one of your former players, Michael Porter, and I know I'm running short on time, so I'll be brief here. Michael Porter has been criticized this week because of his tweet, and I'm not sure if you saw the tweet specific, but he was calling for prayer for the officers that murdered George Floyd. So have you spoken to Michael? What was the
we spoke via text, and what I said to him, but first of all, one part, Mike didn't, and I want to be respectful when I say this, Mike didn't grow up with wealth. He's a good-looking kid, but he didn't grow up with wealth. But Mike has a big heart. Mike understands the Lord. He understands God. He understands his faith. He understands what he was saying. He's an intelligent young man. Maybe the timing was not the right time, so he understands that.
And let me just interject. I'm not personally being critical of it.
And Mike has a good heart.
Right, clearly.
But those are things that you learn and you grow, and he'll be better for it. But again, does Mike feel the pain of George and his family? Yes.
Without question, yeah.
But he also feels the pain of what could happen to that officer's family. I think if you ask anybody deep down inside, would you want something to happen to that officer's family? I think people with a good heart would say no. I think they would. Timing was probably bad. Mike understands. Mike moves forward, valuable lesson learned, but he's a sound man. He got good parents, and he'll keep moving forward.
What, in closing, Coach, what is it, because I think there are a lot of people right now who are obviously more aware, a lot of white people right now who are more aware of this than maybe they have been in their entire life. A lot of people want to, and right now on social media, it's turned into this world where people are telling other people how to do good and what isn't good. What would your message be to anyone, basketball player, coach, fan, guy, anyone else on the street who genuinely wants to do good? That's the point of these podcasts. We're trying to increase the conversation, increase the awareness. but there's also got to be next steps that people can relate to.
Well, I'll answer that two ways. I think next steps, first and foremost, if you're in a college landscape, get involved on the college campus. I think colleges have to do a better job of getting in the community, because you have some colleges that are blocks away from underprivileged towns and areas, and it's like being 50 miles away.
Absolutely.
The university, you owe it to reach out to those communities. I think that is important. You have to, again, like I said, the school teachers, the churches, the police officers, we all have to come together and talk about how do we make our community better, because we all live in it. Now, I think on another level, and I'll just kind of read some things to you, because I've always been a student of Martin Luther King, amongst others, and I'll just kind of read this, and hopefully it doesn't get winded, but I just really want you to feel me.
Yeah, please.
He had his speech on what is your life's blueprint? What is your life's blueprint? I think he gave this speech in Philadelphia to some high school kids, and he said, what you need a sound blueprint. And the first thing, you need a deep belief in your own dignity and your own worth. Don't allow anybody to make you feel that you're nobody. Always feel that you count, always feel that you have worth, and always feel that you have ultimate significance. The second thing he talked about, you have to have the determination to achieve excellence, no matter how hard times get. Then he said you have to set out to do your job as well as you can and be the best, whether you're living, dead, or unborn, that nobody else can do it better. And then the last thing he said, you have to have a commitment to the eternal principles of beauty, love, and justice. And everything I just said to you had nothing to do with a color. Had nothing to do with the color. And then the last thing, because he uses one of Langston Hughes' speeches, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. By all means, get there. And I think we as a nation, we have to get there, because I think as bad as the pandemic or the coronavirus is and what has taken place, I think the plus in all of that, it caused us all to pit stop. So now we can't run and hide, because normally when this situation is taking place with a George Floyd, when that takes place, there's a sporting event, or the Super Bowl tomorrow, a Major League Baseball game, time has stopped. So we all have to see it. And I don't think we get another chance to pit stop from this point on.
Coach, that is an incredibly powerful sentiment. I thank you very much for that, and thank you very much for joining us today. As I said, you were someone who was described as a leader in the community and the coaching community. It's very clear after this discussion why that's the case. So thank you very much for taking so much time.
Thank you for having me, Adam. Enjoy your day.
Absolutely. You too, Coach.